All right, hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Thanks, ready to dive in.
Awesome. So today we're taking a look at this excerpt all about secular life. It got me thinking about all those, big questions.
Big questions, huh? Like what?
Like personal beliefs, how we sort of form a society, the stuff that really makes you think.
Sounds deep.
It is. And get this, it even had this funny little image of a cat. We'll get to that later, though.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
But first, we got to start with the basics. The word secular, we hear it all the time, but what does it actually mean?
Right, yeah.
Basically, it's about focusing on the parts of life that aren't religious or spiritual,
Yeah.
the stuff that's tangible, the everyday world.
Here and now.
Exactly. So what pops into your head when you hear that word secular?
Well, I think a lot of people associate it with the whole separation of church and state thing. But this excerpt, it seems to be going deeper than that. It's like, how do individuals live in a world where maybe traditional religious ideas don't have all the answers?
You hit the nail on the head. Because the excerpt, it starts with this question. It asks, why do we argue so much about how people should live? And I don't know about you, but I've definitely thought about that before.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a question that's been around forever, right?
Right. So the excerpt goes on, and it kind of suggests that maybe since there's no, universal divine authority, we all end up interpreting what's right on our own. And that's where the clashes come in. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful point. It's like, without clear-cut divine intervention, where some higher power just tells you what to do, we all rely on our own experiences and interpretations to fill in the gaps.
It's true. We're kind of making it up as we go along.
In a way, yeah. And the excerpt, it actually calls us messengers from God, even though there might not be a physical God sending us messages.
Whoa, I like that.
And of course, when everyone's got their own version of the message, well, that's where those differing ideas about what a good life looks like come from.
Right. It's like everyone's walking around with their own little moral compass. But those compasses, they don't always point in the same direction.
Precisely. And to make it even more complex, this internal compass, it's not always just about religious beliefs.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the excerpt talks about this other idea, secular morality. It's this whole concept that ethical frameworks, they can exist outside of religion too, drawing on things like reason, empathy, and that shared understanding of human well-being.
Like doing good because it's good for humanity, not because a book told you to.
Exactly. Take utilitarianism, for example. That focuses on maximizing happiness and reducing suffering for as many people as possible. Or humanism, which prioritizes human values and reason over, say, divine revelation.
I see. So it's not about totally rejecting religion necessarily. It's more like acknowledging that there could be multiple ways to live a morally good life, whether you're religious or not.
Exactly. And the excerpt really drives this home through the writer's personal thoughts. They admit to not really believing in God, even questioning how dependable a God would be. But at the same time, they're still striving to live ethically, emphasizing kindness and, minimizing harm. What stands out to you about that perspective?
I think the honesty was what struck me. It just felt so real. And honestly, I relate to it. I find myself wrestling with those big life questions too, without leaning on traditional religious ideas.
I get that.
It made me think about, how do we even create meaning and purpose in a secular world?
Absolutely. I think that's a question a lot of people grapple with. And it really challenges the idea that you can't be moral without religion, The writer seems to be saying that living a good life, it's not about following a strict set of rules handed down from above, but more about making thoughtful choices that align with your own sense of ethics and compassion.
And that brings us back to the excerpt's point about letting people live their own lives without forcing beliefs on them. I loved how it kind of poked fun at that whole idea, saying something like, maybe God needs an ego check.
Yes. It's funny, but it makes a really important point. It highlights that core principle of secularism, freedom of choice, the right to choose your own path. But of course, that brings up another question. Where's the line? Where does individual freedom cross over into potentially causing harm? How do we as a society figure that out?
It's a tough one for sure. It's like walking a tightrope.
Exactly. And I think this is where that visual you mentioned comes in. The one with the people arguing and the cat napping.
Ah, yes. That image was powerful. It's like we get so caught up in these disagreements that we forget to see the bigger picture. And there's a cat just chilling out, totally unbothered.
Right. It's like a reminder to take a breath, zoom out a little, are arguments really worth all the energy? Maybe there are better ways to handle things, more compassionate ways to connect with people who see things differently.
Okay, so let's recap. We've been talking about this idea of a secular life. And it's not about saying religion is wrong. It's about recognizing all the different ways people approach life's big questions, especially when the answers aren't so clear-cut.
Right. And we've seen how ethical frameworks can exist totally separate from religion, how our personal experiences shape our definition of good, and how having the freedom to choose your own path, it also means being responsible and aware of how those choices impact others.
And that leads us to our final thought-provoking question. If our values, like the things we build our society on, if those don't come from some universal higher power, then how do we decide as a whole what's right and wrong? How do we create those shared ethics in a world that's so diverse and always changing?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And I think it's something we're all figuring out together, constantly, exploring different philosophies, ethical perspectives, being willing to have those open, respectful discussions even when we disagree, and realizing that maybe there isn't one single right answer. It's a process.
So keep those questions coming. Keep exploring. The journey is just as important as the destination. At least that's what I'm learning.
Couldn't agree more.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
See you then.